I always thought happily married was like jumbo shrimp. Possible in theory, but never quite real in practice. At least not in my house. My name is Dave Carver, and I'm a structural engineer who spent 15 years building bridges, while my wife Julia systematically burned everyone behind her. The first crack in our foundation appeared on a Tuesday evening in March. I was reviewing blueprints for a downtown office complex when Julia waltzed through our apartment door at 11:30, her lipstick slightly smudged and her story already rehearsed. "Sorry, honey, the Henderson account meeting ran late, then Rachel insisted we grab drinks to celebrate closing the deal." She kissed my forehead with the enthusiasm of someone checking off a grocery list item. Julia worked in public relations for a boutique firm downtown. She was good at her job. Spinning narratives and managing reputations came naturally to her. I should have paid more attention to how effortlessly she practiced those skills at home. "How's Rachel doing?" I asked, not looking up from my drawings. "Oh, you know Rachel. Same drama, different day. Her ex is still texting, her boss is still impossible, and she's still convinced every man in the city is either married or insane. The thing about lies is they require maintenance, like any other structure, and Julia was getting sloppy with her upkeep. I'd known Rachel for 8 years. She was married to a dentist named Gary, had been for 6 years, and was currently pregnant with their second child. She wasn't dating anyone, let alone complaining about exes and crazy bachelors. But I didn't say anything, not yet. In engineering, you don't tear down a structure until you understand exactly what's holding it up. The second crack appeared the following Thursday. Julia announced she'd be working late again. Another client dinner, another celebration, another perfectly reasonable excuse. I nodded and went back to my calculations. But this time I paid attention to the details. She wore her black dress, the one she called her confidence booster. She touched up her makeup twice before leaving and sprayed on enough perfume to fog up our bathroom mirror. Most telling of all, she'd shaved her legs that morning. I knew because she'd used my razor and left it clogged with soap residue on the shower shelf. Julia hadn't shaved her legs for a client dinner since never. I spent the evening reviewing security camera footage from our building's entrance. We'd installed the system 6 months earlier after a string of package thefts, and I'd set up the app on my phone to monitor comings and goings. Technology was supposed to make us feel safer. Instead, it was about to make me feel like an idiot. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Julia returned at 12:47 a.m., stumbling slightly as she fumbled with her keys. But she wasn't alone in the lobby. A man in an expensive suit held the door for her, his hand resting on the small of her back with casual familiarity. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but I could see enough of his profile to recognize him. Mark Hensley, real estate developer, smooth talker, and my former college roommate turned rival. The same Mark who'd stolen my girlfriend senior year, then had the audacity to invite me to their wedding. The same Mark who'd jokingly hit on Julia at our own wedding reception while I was dancing with my mother. Some patterns never change. They just find new ways to repeat themselves. I didn't confront Julia immediately. Instead, I did what any good engineer would do. I gathered more data. I started paying attention to her schedule, her moods, her habits. I noticed she'd been hitting the gym more often, buying new lingerie, and checking her phone with the frequency of a day trader watching stock prices. The final piece of evidence came courtesy of Mark's carelessness and Julia's vanity. I arrived home early from a job site inspection, my boots still caked with concrete dust, to find a gold cufflink on our bedroom dresser. Not mine. I hadn't worn cufflinks since our wedding, but I recognized the distinctive H engraving from Mark's monogram collection. Maybe it was a new charm for Julia's bracelet. Maybe pigs were learning to fly formation patterns outside our window. I pocketed the cufflink and reviewed the building's security footage again, this time going back 3 weeks. The pattern was clear. Julia's late work nights coincided perfectly with Mark's visits to our building. He never went up to our apartment, too risky, too obvious. But he'd wait in the lobby, sometimes for 20 or 30 minutes, until Julia came down. They were meeting somewhere else, somewhere private, somewhere they felt safe. I spent the next week playing detective, tracking their movements through social media posts, credit card statements, and good old-fashioned observation. Julia had gotten careless with her phone, leaving it unlocked while she showered. Her text messages with Rachel were illuminating. "He's getting suspicious," Dave asked about Tuesday night. "Just stick to the story. You were with me, we had drinks, end of discussion." "I can't keep doing this. What if he finds out?" "Relax. Dave's clueless. He's too buried in his blueprints to notice anything." That last message stung more than it should have. Clueless. Maybe, but not blind. The breakthrough came when I installed a small camera in our bedroom. Nothing fancy, just a basic security device I'd ordered online and disguised as a digital clock. I told Julia it was a new alarm system with backup recording features, in case we ever got robbed. She barely looked at it. But 3 days later, I got the footage I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. Julia brought Mark to our apartment on a Friday afternoon while I was supposedly at a client meeting across town. I'd actually driven around the corner and parked, waiting for the notification from our building's motion sensors. They thought they had 2 hours. They were wrong. I watched the recording that evening after Julia left for another work event. Seeing your wife with another man in your own bed is like watching a controlled demolition. You know it's coming. You understand the mechanics. But the actual collapse still takes your breath away. But I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt something much more useful, furious. Julia had made a critical error in judgment. She'd assumed I was too passive, too comfortable, too invested in our life together to fight back. She'd calculated wrong. I copied the video file to 3 separate drives, uploaded it to a secure cloud account, and emailed copies to myself from 2 different addresses. Then I sat in my study, drinking bourbon and planning my next move. Julia came home at 1:15 a.m., reeking of wine and Mark's cologne. She found me waiting in the kitchen, the cufflink sitting on the counter between us like a tiny golden accusation. "We need to talk," I said. Her face went pale, but she recovered quickly. "Dave, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. You're excellent at explanations. Always have been." She reached for the cufflink, but I was faster. "This isn't what it looks like." "Really? Because it looks like evidence. And I'm very good with evidence." Julia tried tears first, then anger, then bargaining. She promised to end it, swore it meant nothing, blamed Mark for pursuing her relentlessly. She painted herself as the victim of his manipulation, a poor innocent who'd made a terrible mistake. I let her finish her performance, then I showed her the video. The color drained from her face as she watched herself and Mark in our bed, in our home, destroying our marriage with casual enthusiasm. When it ended, she looked up at me with something I'd never seen before. Fear. "Dave, please, we can work through this. We can go to counseling, we can get divorced," I said. "But first, we're going to have some fun." I stood up, pocketed my phone, and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" she called after me. I paused at the threshold and smiled. "To share your performance with a wider audience. You always said you wanted to be famous." The look on her face was worth every sleepless night I'd spent gathering evidence, but it was nothing compared to what came next. Now came the fun part. I've always believed in the power of good timing. In construction, you pour concrete when conditions are perfect. Right temperature, right humidity, right crew availability. Rush the process, and everything crumbles. Wait too long, and you miss your window entirely. Julia's destruction required the same careful scheduling. I spent Saturday morning at my office, using the company's high-speed internet and professional editing software to create what I privately called Julia's greatest hits. The raw footage was damning enough, but presentation matters. I added timestamps, enhanced the audio quality, and created a clean, professional-looking file that would play on any device. Then I compiled my distribution list. Julia's contact information lived on our shared laptop, organized with the same obsessive attention to detail she brought to her PR campaigns. I had phone numbers and email addresses for her entire professional network, colleagues, clients, supervisors, industry contacts. Her personal life was equally well documented. Family members, college friends, neighbors, gym buddies. Mark's information took more effort to gather, but his real estate business required public visibility. His company website listed team members, partner firms, and board directors. His social media accounts were treasure troves of tagged photos and professional connections. By noon, I had 247 email addresses and phone numbers, more than enough for a proper premiere. I started with Julia's mother. Patricia Halverson lived in a sprawling suburban mansion and treated social standing like a competitive sport. She'd never liked me. I wasn't wealthy enough, connected enough, or ambitious enough for her precious daughter. But she was going to love this video. The email was simple. "Patricia, I thought you should see what Julia's been up to lately. Best regards, Dave." Next came Julia's boss, Richard Steinberg, managing partner at Morrison & Associates PR. Julia had been angling for a promotion to senior account manager, emphasizing her commitment to professional excellence and ethical standards. This video would certainly demonstrate her commitment to something. I sent copies to her entire department, including Rachel, who'd been covering for Julia's affair with the dedication of a professional accomplice. Let's see how loyal she remained when her own reputation was on the line. Mark's wife, Jennifer, received special treatment. I'd met her several times at social events, a sweet, trusting woman who genuinely believed her husband worked late because he was dedicated to his clients. She deserved to know where his dedication really lay. I sent the video to Mark's business partner, his assistant, his country club buddies, and his tennis league. Mark had built his reputation on being a family man who could be trusted with people's biggest investments. Time to test that brand positioning. By 2 p.m., I'd distributed Julia's performance to everyone who mattered in both their professional and personal lives. Then I sat back and waited for the fireworks. The first explosion came at 2:47 p.m. My phone rang with Julia's ringtone. She'd chosen Stand By Your Man years ago as a joke. The irony wasn't lost on me now. "Dave, what have you done?" Her voice was shaking, barely controlled panic wrapped in fake calm. "I shared your work with people who appreciate good performances. You should be flattered by the audience size." "You can't do this. This is private. This is consequences, Julia. Something you've managed to avoid for most of your adult life." "My mother called me crying. My boss wants to see me first thing Monday morning. Rachel won't even answer her phone." Rachel's probably busy explaining to Gary why she's been lying about her whereabouts. Pregnancy makes women emotional, or so I've heard. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Then, "I'll destroy you for this." "With what? Your credibility? Your reputation? Your moral authority?" I laughed. "Good luck with that." She did hang up then, but my phone kept ringing. Mark called 6 times in the next hour, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Jennifer called once, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words. Patricia called to scream at me for humiliating the family, then called back 20 minutes later to demand I delete the video immediately. But the most interesting call came from Sid Patel, my closest friend and the IT manager at my engineering firm. "Dave, buddy, what the hell is going on? I just got a very weird email from your account." I'd sent Sid the video too, along with a note explaining the situation, not because I wanted to humiliate Julia in front of my friends, but because I needed allies. Julia was going to fight back, and she'd use every weapon in her considerable arsenal. Julia's been having an affair with Mark Hensley. I caught them, recorded them, and now everyone knows about it. "Jesus, are you okay?" "I'm better than okay. I'm liberated." Sid was quiet for a moment. "This is pretty nuclear, Dave. You sure you want to go this route?" She made the choice to betray me in our own home, with my former roommate, while lying to my face for months. I'm just making sure she faces appropriate consequences. "Fair enough. What do you need from me?" That was why Sid was my best friend. No judgment, no lectures about taking the high road, just practical support when I needed it most. "Help me disappear for a while. I need somewhere to stay while this plays out, and I need to make sure my digital footprint stays clean. You can use my guest room as long as you want, and I'll set up some privacy protocols for your online accounts." By Sunday morning, the fallout was spectacular. Julia's social media accounts had been deactivated. Too many comments from people who'd seen the video. Mark's real estate company website was down for maintenance, though I suspected they were dealing with a flood of negative attention. Rachel had thrown Julia completely under the bus, posting a long Facebook message about how she'd been manipulated into covering for a friend's poor choices, and how she never supported or encouraged the affair. She tagged Julia in the post, ensuring maximum visibility and plausible deniability. Patricia had called the police, claiming I'd violated privacy laws by recording Julia without consent. The officer who called me back was polite but firm. Recording someone in your own home wasn't illegal, and distributing evidence of adultery wasn't a crime. He suggested Julia consult a divorce attorney instead of wasting police resources. Monday morning brought fresh chaos. Julia's boss called an emergency meeting to discuss her conduct unbecoming a professional representative of the firm. 3 of Mark's biggest clients requested immediate meetings to reassess their business relationships. Jennifer filed for divorce and hired the most aggressive attorney in the city. I watched it all unfold from Sid's guest room, monitoring social media and news feeds like a general tracking enemy movements. Julia tried calling me 17 times. Mark sent increasingly threatening text messages. Patricia left a voicemail offering me $50,000 to make this nightmare go away. But the most satisfying moment came Tuesday afternoon when I drove past Mark's luxury car dealership and saw his black BMW in the parking lot. The same car he'd used to pick up Julia for their secret meetings. The same car that had been photographed outside our building dozens of times. It was a beautiful vehicle. Or it had been before someone had slashed all 4 tires, keyed "home wrecker" into the paint, and decorated the windshield with what appeared to be maple syrup and birdseed, I had nothing to do with the vandalism, of course, but Reggie, the bartender at Murphy's Tavern where I'd been drinking lately, had mentioned knowing some guys who specialized in creative problem-solving, and I may have mentioned Mark's license plate number during one of our conversations. Reggie was very good at remembering details. The police investigated the vandalism, but security cameras in the area had mysteriously malfunctioned that night. Mark filed an insurance claim, but his company was already reviewing his policy due to reputation concerns. The repairs would cost him $12,000 out of pocket. Julia's world was collapsing faster than a house built on sand. Her promotion was officially postponed indefinitely. Her mother stopped taking her calls after Patricia's garden club friends started asking pointed questions about family values. Even her gym membership was canceled when other members complained about her presence making them uncomfortable. But I wasn't finished, not even close. Mark thought he could threaten me with text messages and angry voicemails. Julia thought she could manipulate the narrative and play the victim. They'd both underestimated the patience and creativity of a man with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. If revenge was a dish best served cold, I was opening my own freezer section. Wednesday morning brought rain and fresh opportunities for creative problem-solving. I sat in Sid's kitchen, drinking coffee and reading news articles about reputation management in the digital age while planning my next moves. Julia and Mark had spent 2 days in crisis mode trying to contain the damage from my video distribution. Time to show them what real crisis management looked like. Phase 2 of my campaign required more sophisticated tools than email blasts and social media posts. I needed to get inside their professional lives, their business relationships, their carefully constructed public personas. Fortunately, I had advantages they didn't know about. Sid arrived home from work with a laptop bag and a conspiratorial grin. "I brought you some presents from the office." He unpacked 3 devices, a signal booster, a network analyzer, and what looked like a standard wireless router. This little beauty can intercept and mirror network traffic from any device within a 100-foot radius, completely legal for security testing purposes, and completely useful for gathering intelligence on cheating spouses and their accomplices. That's a secondary application, yes? We spent the evening setting up surveillance equipment in my car, parked across from Mark's office building. His real estate company occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered perfect sightlines for directional microphones and telephoto cameras. Mark's routine was predictable. Arrive at 8 a.m., leave for lunch at noon, client meetings in the afternoon, drinks with potential investors most evenings. He was trying to maintain normal business operations while his personal life imploded, but stress was making him sloppy. Thursday's lunch meeting was particularly illuminating. Mark met with 3 investors at an upscale restaurant, trying to secure funding for a mixed-use development project. I watched from across the street, using a parabolic microphone to capture their conversation through the restaurant's open windows. The investors had seen the video. Of course they had. I'd made sure to include them in my distribution list. They spent 40 minutes grilling Mark about his judgment issues and character concerns. The lead investor, a silver-haired woman named Margaret Chen, was particularly brutal. "Mark, we're not just investing in your project. We're investing in you, your reputation, your ability to represent our interests professionally. This video raises serious questions about your decision-making capabilities." Mark tried to deflect, claiming the affair was a personal matter that wouldn't affect his business performance. Margaret wasn't buying it. Personal matters become public relations problems, Mark, and public relations problems become financial liabilities. We need to reassess our involvement in this project. By the end of lunch, Mark had lost his primary funding source. The development deal he'd been working on for 8 months was effectively finished. I celebrated by ordering an expensive bottle of wine and having it delivered to Jennifer's attorney's office, along with a note congratulating her on her excellent choice of legal representation. Julia's situation was deteriorating even faster. Her boss had placed her on administrative leave pending investigation after 3 clients specifically requested she be removed from their accounts. The investigation was supposedly about professional conduct, but everyone knew it was really about the video. Rachel had completely abandoned her former best friend, going so far as to post Instagram stories about toxic people and fake friends, while conspicuously avoiding any mention of Julia. The rest of Julia's social circle followed suit, distancing themselves with the speed of politicians fleeing a scandal. Friday evening brought my first direct confrontation with Julia since the video release. She appeared at Sid's apartment unannounced, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup was smudged, and her designer clothes were wrinkled. "Dave, please. We need to talk." I let her in, curious to see what approach she'd take. Tears, anger, seduction. Julia had always been adaptable, shifting tactics based on her audience's weaknesses. She chose seduction. "I made a terrible mistake," she said, moving closer to me on Sid's couch. "I was confused, lonely, looking for something I thought was missing in our marriage. But I realize now that everything I need is right here." Her hand touched my arm, fingers trailing up toward my shoulder. "We can fix this, Dave. We can be stronger than before. All those people, all that judgment, it doesn't matter. What matters is us." She was good, really good. The trembling voice, the vulnerable posture, the carefully timed touches. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Under different circumstances, it might have worked. Instead, I activated the recording app on my phone. "So, you're saying the affair meant nothing to you?" "Nothing at all. Mark pursued me relentlessly, wore down my defenses when I was feeling neglected. I should have told you immediately, should have been stronger." "And the lies? The cover-up? Having Rachel help you deceive me?" "I was scared, ashamed. I knew I'd hurt you, and I was desperate to avoid causing more pain." She was building a complete alternate narrative, one that painted her as the victim of Mark's manipulation and her own temporary weakness. It was exactly the kind of story she'd use if this conversation ever became public, which it would in about 30 minutes. "I love you, Dave. I've always loved you. This whole nightmare has made me realize how much I need you, how empty my life is without you." She leaned in for a kiss, her lips barely brushing mine before I pulled away. "That's a beautiful story, Julia. Really touching. I'm sure your mother will love hearing it." Her face changed instantly, seduction replaced by confusion. "What do you mean?" I held up my phone, showing the recording app. "I mean, you just gave a command performance, and it deserves a proper audience." The color drained from her face. "You recorded me?" "The same way I recorded you with Mark. I'm very consistent that way." She lunged for the phone, but I was ready for her. I stood up, keeping the device out of reach while she grabbed at my arms. "Delete it! Dave, please, you can't." "I can, and I will. This conversation is going to everyone who received the first video, along with a few additional recipients who might find it educational." She collapsed back onto the couch, finally understanding that tears and manipulation wouldn't work this time. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to experience consequences. Real, lasting, unavoidable consequences for your choices." I uploaded the audio file to my laptop and began composing emails. Julia sat in stunned silence, watching me distribute her latest performance to the same audience that had already seen her greatest hits reel. This recording was different, though. More personal, more revealing. It showed her willingness to lie, manipulate, and rewrite history to avoid accountability. Anyone who might have felt sympathy for her after the first video would find it much harder to maintain that sympathy after hearing her calculated attempt to seduce me back into compliance. "I'll destroy you for this," she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. "With what army, Julia? Your friends have abandoned you. Your family is embarrassed by you. Your career is over. Mark's too busy trying to save his own business to help you. What exactly are you going to destroy me with?" She left without answering, but I knew she'd try something. Julia never accepted defeat gracefully. She'd regroup, find new allies, develop a counterattack strategy. But she was operating from a position of weakness now, and I held all the high ground. Saturday brought news of Mark's latest humiliation. Someone had hacked his company's website and replaced the professional headshots with screenshots from the video. His business partner, Darren Walsh, had called an emergency board meeting to discuss leadership transitions. Mark's own employees were updating their LinkedIn profiles and reaching out to competitors. Sunday's surprise came from an unexpected source. Patricia Halverson appeared at Sid's apartment with a briefcase and a desperate expression. "David, we need to discuss terms." She was trying to buy my silence, offering increasingly large sums of money to delete the videos and allow Julia to rebuild her life. The offer started at $50,000 and escalated quickly to $200,000, then $300,000. "Patricia, I appreciate the gesture, but Julia's problems can't be solved with money." "Everyone has a price, David. Name yours." "My price is justice. Julia made choices, and now she gets to live with the consequences. No amount of money changes that equation." Patricia's composure finally cracked. "You're destroying an innocent girl's life over a moment of weakness." "Innocent?" Julia carried on a months-long affair with my former roommate in our home while lying to my face every single day. She recruited her friends to help maintain the deception. She showed no remorse until she got caught, and even then, her first instinct was to manipulate me back into compliance. "That's not innocence, Patricia. That's sociopathy." She left the briefcase on Sid's coffee table. $300,000 in bearer bonds, more money than I'd ever seen in one place, but I didn't touch it. Money couldn't repair the damage Julia had done to our marriage, our trust, our shared history. Only accountability could do that, and accountability was exactly what she was going to get. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth and the kind of clear skies that make everything seem possible. I returned Patricia's briefcase unopened, along with a note explaining that some things weren't for sale. Then I focused on the next phase of my campaign, professional destruction. Julia's career in public relations was built on relationships, reputation, and trust. She'd spent years cultivating contacts, developing expertise, and building credibility within her industry. All of that could be destroyed much faster than it had been created, especially with the right leverage applied at critical moments. Her biggest client presentation was scheduled for Thursday morning. Morrison & Associates was pitching a comprehensive reputation management campaign to Hartwell Industries, a manufacturing company trying to recover from a workplace safety scandal. Julia had been working on the proposal for 6 weeks, and landing the account would normally guarantee her promotion to senior account manager. But Julia was currently on administrative leave, which meant someone else would be delivering her presentation, someone who might not be fully prepared, someone who might benefit from additional information about the client's expectations and concerns. I'd done my research on Hartwell Industries, studying their recent legal troubles, their executive team, their corporate culture, and their strategic priorities. More importantly, I'd identified their primary decision-maker, Chief Marketing Officer Amanda Richardson, a no-nonsense executive who valued honesty, integrity, and professional competence above all else. Amanda had built her career on cleaning up other people's mistakes. She'd joined Hartwell specifically to rebuild their reputation after the safety scandal, and she had zero tolerance for consultants who couldn't meet her exacting standards. She was exactly the kind of person who would appreciate knowing about Julia's recent performance issues. I sent Amanda a carefully crafted email, introducing myself as a concerned industry observer who'd noticed some troubling patterns in Morrison & Associates' recent work. I included links to several articles about professional ethics in public relations, along with some background information about Julia's situation that might be relevant to their decision-making process. The video was attached as supporting documentation. Wednesday evening brought confirmation that my message had been received. Amanda forwarded my email to Richard Steinberg, Julia's boss, along with a note expressing serious concerns about the professional standards and ethical judgment of your proposed account team. She requested a meeting to discuss alternative staffing arrangements for the Hartwell project. Richard called an emergency staff meeting for Thursday morning, 2 hours before the Hartwell presentation. According to my source inside Morrison & Associates, a junior account executive named Tommy who owed me a favor from college, the meeting was brutal. Richardson wants Julia completely removed from the account, Tommy told me over drinks that evening. Not just for the presentation, but permanently. She said having someone with documented judgment issues anywhere near a reputation management campaign would be like hiring an arsonist as a fire safety consultant. Julia wasn't even allowed in the building during the presentation. Richard had assigned the account to his most senior associate, but the replacement had only 48 hours to prepare for a pitch that Julia had spent 6 weeks developing. The presentation was a disaster. Hartwell Industries chose a different firm entirely, citing concerns about Morrison & Associates' internal instability and questionable personnel decisions. Richard lost his biggest potential client of the year, along with the commission that would have funded his daughter's college tuition. Julia was officially terminated on Friday morning. Mark's situation was deteriorating even faster. His business partner had initiated buyout proceedings, claiming Mark's personal controversies were damaging the company's reputation and threatening existing client relationships. The buyout price was significantly below market value, reflecting the diminished worth of Mark's professional brand. His wife's divorce attorney was seeking 50% of all marital assets, plus substantial alimony payments based on Mark's historical earning capacity. Jennifer had also filed for exclusive custody of their 2 children, citing Mark's moral unfitness and pattern of deceptive behavior. But the most satisfying development came from an unexpected source, Mark's own arrogance. He'd been trying to salvage his reputation through aggressive damage control, claiming the affair was a mutual mistake that had been blown out of proportion by a vindictive ex-husband. He gave interviews to local business publications, portraying himself as the victim of a malicious smear campaign. The interviews were a gift. Mark's own words, preserved in print and online video, showed him minimizing the affair, blaming Julia for pursuing him relentlessly and suggesting that I was unstable and obsessed with revenge. He painted a picture of himself as a successful businessman whose only mistake was showing compassion to a troubled woman. I forwarded copies of every interview to Jennifer's divorce attorney, along with detailed timelines showing that Mark's version of events contradicted the evidence from building security cameras, credit card records, and his own text messages. His attempts to control the narrative had actually made his legal position much worse. Saturday brought my second direct confrontation with the happy couple. Mark appeared at Sid's apartment building, apparently having followed me from my office. He was waiting by my car when I returned from grocery shopping, his face flushed with anger and desperation. "We need to talk, Dave." "I'm listening." "This has gone far enough. You've made your point. Julia's lost her job. I'm losing my business. Our families are destroyed. What more do you want?" "I want you to experience the full consequences of your choices. Both of you." "Come on, man. We were roommates. We used to be friends." "Friends don't sleep with each other's wives, Mark. Friends don't lie, manipulate, and betray people who trust them." He stepped closer, trying to use his height advantage to intimidate me. "You're destroying innocent people over a relationship that was already broken. Julia told me your marriage was over months before we got together." "Julia told you a lot of things, apparently. How many of them do you think were actually true?" That stopped him cold. Mark was finally starting to understand that Julia's manipulation hadn't been limited to me. She'd been playing him too, telling him whatever he needed to hear to justify their affair. "Look, I'll make this right. I'll pay for your divorce attorney, help you find a new apartment, whatever you need. Just stop the campaign." The campaign stops when justice is served, not before. Mark's composure finally snapped. He grabbed my shirt, pushing me against my car. "You're going to destroy all of us, including yourself. Is that really what you want?" I didn't fight back. Instead, I smiled and pointed to the security camera mounted above the parking garage entrance. "Smile, Mark. You're on candid camera again." He released me immediately, realizing he'd just provided me with footage of him physically threatening me. The video would be perfect evidence for any future restraining order applications, and it would play beautifully in his custody hearings. "You're insane," he muttered, backing away. "I'm thorough. There's a difference." He left, but I knew he'd be back. Desperate people make desperate choices, and Mark was running out of options. His business was failing, his marriage was over, his reputation was destroyed, and his legal bills were mounting daily. He needed someone to blame for his problems, and I was the obvious target. But I was ready for whatever he tried next. In fact, I was counting on it. Sunday brought news that Julia had moved back in with her mother, a development that must have thrilled Patricia. The two strongest-willed women in my former social circle, trapped in the same house, blaming each other for their current circumstances. It was like a reality show I'd actually want to watch. More importantly, Julia's return to her childhood home meant she was isolated from her remaining allies and completely dependent on her family's financial support. Patricia might have $300,000 in bearer bonds lying around, but she wasn't going to subsidize Julia's lifestyle indefinitely. Eventually, Julia would have to find work, rebuild her reputation, and face the professional consequences of her choices. That process was going to take years, if it was possible at all. The public relations industry was small, gossipy, and unforgiving. Julia's story had already spread through professional networks, industry publications, and social media platforms. Her name was permanently associated with scandal, poor judgment, and ethical violations. She'd built her career on managing other people's reputations. Now she couldn't manage her own. The irony was perfect, but I wasn't finished savoring it yet. Julia still had one card left to play, one desperate gambit that might salvage something from the wreckage of her life. She was going to try to destroy me. Monday morning brought an unexpected phone call from my boss, Peterson. His voice carried the careful neutrality of someone delivering bad news while trying to maintain plausible deniability. "Dave, we need to talk. Can you come in early today?" I arrived at the office to find Peterson waiting with our HR director, Margaret Walsh, and a stack of printed documents. The papers were spread across the conference table like evidence at a trial. "Dave, we've received some concerning information about your recent personal situation," Peterson began. "Allegations have been made about your conduct, your stability, and your fitness to represent our company professionally." Margaret slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed emails, social media screenshots, and what appeared to be a formal complaint letter. All of it painted me as an unstable, vindictive ex-husband who'd engaged in harassment, stalking, and possibly illegal surveillance of my estranged wife. "Who filed this complaint?" "The information came from multiple sources," Margaret replied carefully, "but the primary complaint was filed by Julia Carver, with supporting statements from several witnesses." I reviewed the documents, recognizing Julia's handiwork immediately. She'd constructed a narrative that flipped our entire story, portraying herself as the victim of an abusive marriage and me as a controlling husband who'd snapped when she tried to leave. The affair with Mark was reframed as her attempt to escape an emotionally abusive relationship. The supporting statements came from people I'd never met, claiming to have witnessed my threatening behavior and obsessive monitoring of Julia's activities. One witness swore they'd seen me following Julia to work. Another claimed I'd made threatening phone calls to her friends and family members. It was completely fabricated, but professionally presented. Julia had used her public relations skills to create a convincing alternative version of events, complete with corroborating testimony and emotional appeals about domestic abuse and workplace safety. "This is fiction," I told Peterson. "Pure, calculated fiction designed to destroy my reputation the same way I destroyed hers." "Can you prove that?" "I can prove everything I've done has been legal, justified, and proportionate to her betrayal. But proving a negative, that I didn't do things I never did, is much harder." Peterson looked uncomfortable. "Dave, your personal life is your business, but when it starts affecting our company's reputation, it becomes my business too. Several clients have asked about the situation. Some are concerned about having you on their projects. Based on lies Julia fabricated to save her own career. Maybe, but perception is reality in this business. Right or wrong, some people now see you as a liability." Margaret leaned forward. "We're not terminating your employment, Dave, but we are placing you on administrative leave pending a full investigation of these allegations." Administrative leave, the same punishment Julia had received before her termination. She was using my own tactics against me, trying to destroy my professional life the way I'd destroyed hers. It was actually impressive in a sociopathic kind of way. I left the office with my personal belongings in a cardboard box, just like Julia had done the previous week. But unlike Julia, I wasn't panicking. I'd expected this counterattack, and I'd prepared for it. The first step was identifying Julia's sources. The witness statements were too detailed and consistent to be completely fabricated. She'd found people willing to lie for her, either through bribery, manipulation, or shared hatred of me. I started with Rachel, who'd supposedly witnessed my threatening behavior at Julia's office building. According to her statement, I'd confronted Julia in the lobby, grabbed her arm, and made verbal threats about making her pay for leaving me. The incident allegedly occurred on March 15th at 2:30 p.m. I checked my phone's location history and found I'd been at a job site in the suburbs at that time, supervising a foundation pour that lasted from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Dozens of construction workers could verify my whereabouts. More importantly, the building's security cameras would show that I'd never been in Julia's office lobby on March 15th, or any other day since our separation. The second witness was someone named Michael Torres, who claimed to be Julia's neighbor. According to his statement, he'd seen me parked outside Julia's mother's house on multiple occasions, taking photographs and conducting surveillance of the property. Michael Torres didn't exist, at least not at the address listed in his witness statement. I drove to the house and found it occupied by an elderly couple named Henderson, who'd lived there for 30 years. They'd never heard of Michael Torres, and they certainly hadn't witnessed any surveillance activities. Julia had gotten sloppy in her desperation. The fake witness statements were easy to debunk, but they'd served their purpose, creating enough doubt about my character to justify placing me on administrative leave. But her biggest mistake was involving Sid. Tuesday evening, Sid came home from work looking troubled. He'd been quiet during dinner, checking his phone repeatedly and avoiding eye contact. Finally, he set down his fork and looked at me directly. "Dave, I need to tell you something. Julia contacted me today." "About what?" "She offered me a job. Senior IT manager at a consulting firm downtown, 50% salary increase, full benefits, stock options. It's an incredible opportunity." "Congratulations, you deserve it." "That's not the point. She made it clear the job offer was contingent on me providing information about your activities, your plans, your emotional state. She wants me to spy on you." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. And I told her I'd think about it. The betrayal hit harder than Julia's affair had. Sid was my oldest friend, the one person I'd trusted completely throughout this entire ordeal. He'd provided shelter, technical support, and emotional encouragement when everyone else had abandoned me. Now he was considering selling me out for a promotion. "Sid, please tell me you're not seriously thinking about taking that job. It's complicated, Dave. This is my career we're talking about, my future. I can't turn down an opportunity like this just because of personal loyalty." "Personal loyalty? Is that what you call our friendship?" "Our friendship doesn't pay my rent or fund my retirement. This job offer does." I stood up from the dinner table, suddenly understanding how Julia must have felt when her world started collapsing. The difference was that Julia had deserved her fate. I'd been fighting for justice, not personal gain. "How long have you been talking to her?" Sid's silence was answer enough. How long, Sid? Since the beginning. She reached out the day after you sent the video, asking if I knew where you were staying, what you were planning next. I didn't tell her anything important at first, just general information about your emotional state. At first? She's very persuasive, Dave, and very generous. She's been paying me for information about your activities, your plans, your resources. Nothing that would hurt you directly, just enough to help her prepare her defense. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My best friend had been working for my enemy from the very beginning, feeding Julia intelligence about my campaign while pretending to support me. She knew about the parking garage confrontation with Mark because you told her I was planning it. I never told her specifics. You told her enough. She's been 3 steps ahead of me this entire time because she had a spy in my inner circle. Sid looked genuinely remorseful, but not remorseful enough to turn down Julia's job offer. Dave, I'm sorry, but this is business, nothing personal. Everything about this is personal, Sid. That's the whole point. I packed my belongings and left that night, checking into a downtown hotel using cash Patricia had tried to bribe me with. The irony was perfect. Julia's mother was inadvertently funding the next phase of my campaign against her daughter. But first, I had to deal with Sid's betrayal. Wednesday morning, I called Peterson and requested an immediate meeting to discuss the allegations against me. I brought documentation proving the witness statements were fabricated, along with evidence of Julia's coordinated campaign to destroy my reputation. This is a professional hit job, I told Peterson, spreading the evidence across his desk. Julia's using the same skills she used in her PR career to construct a false narrative about our marriage and my behavior. Peterson reviewed the documents carefully. This is compelling, Dave, but it doesn't change the fact that clients are concerned about the situation. Then let's give them something else to be concerned about. I'd spent Tuesday evening researching Julia's new consulting firm, the company that had offered Sid the suspiciously generous job. It was a small operation with big ambitions, founded by a former Morrison and Associates executive who'd left under mysterious circumstances. The company's client list was impressive, but their business model was questionable. They specialized in crisis management and reputation recovery, often for clients who'd been involved in scandals, legal troubles, or ethical violations. Their methods were aggressive, sometimes crossing legal boundaries. More importantly, they were currently under investigation by the State Attorney General's office for possible violations of consumer protection laws. Several former clients had filed complaints claiming the company had used fraudulent tactics, fabricated evidence, and engaged in witness intimidation. Peterson, what would you say if I told you that Julia's new employer is under criminal investigation, and that her job offer to my friend was actually an attempt to recruit him into their witness tampering operation? Peterson's expression changed immediately. I'd say you better have proof of that allegation. I did have proof. Sid had recorded his conversations with Julia, initially as insurance against her trying to betray him later. The recordings showed Julia explicitly asking him to fabricate witness statements, create false documentation, and lie to investigators about my activities. She'd essentially confessed to conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice while trying to recruit Sid as an accomplice. Dave, this changes everything. If Julia is engaged in criminal activity to attack our company's reputation, we need to involve law enforcement immediately. By Thursday morning, the State Attorney General's office had opened a formal investigation into Julia's activities. The FBI's white-collar crime unit was reviewing evidence of interstate fraud and conspiracy. Julia's new employer had suspended her pending the outcome of the investigation. Sid was cooperating with authorities, providing recordings and documentation of Julia's attempts to recruit him into her witness tampering scheme. His job offer had been rescinded, but he was avoiding criminal charges in exchange for his testimony. Julia's counterattack had backfired spectacularly. Instead of destroying my reputation, she'd exposed herself to federal criminal liability while confirming everything I'd said about her character and judgment. But she still had one card left to play. One desperate final gambit that would either salvage her situation or destroy us both. She was going to make our conflict public in the most dramatic way possible. Friday morning dawned gray and threatening, with storm clouds gathering over the city like an omen of the chaos to come. I was reviewing case files in my hotel room when Peterson called with urgent news. Dave, you need to get down here immediately. Julia's in the building, and she's demanding to address our all-hands meeting. Our quarterly all-hands meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference hall, with the entire company in attendance plus several major clients and industry partners. It was our biggest professional gathering of the year, designed to showcase current projects and strengthen business relationships. Julia had chosen her battlefield perfectly. Security won't remove her? She's claiming whistleblower protection, says she has evidence of criminal activity by a company employee. Legal says we have to let her speak or risk a lawsuit. I checked my watch. 9:45 a.m. 15 minutes to prepare for Julia's final assault on my reputation and career. Peterson, I need you to trust me on this. Let her speak, but make sure the entire presentation is recorded, and keep security close, just in case. I arrived at the conference hall as employees were taking their seats. The room buzzed with nervous energy. Everyone knew about my situation, and Julia's unexpected appearance had turned a routine business meeting into must-see drama. Julia stood at the front of the room, looking polished and professional despite everything she'd endured over the past month. She'd chosen her outfit carefully. Conservative business suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a serious style. She looked like a credible witness, not a disgraced adulteress facing criminal charges. Peterson called the meeting to order and reluctantly introduced Julia as a former colleague with information relevant to company operations. The room fell silent as she approached the podium. "Thank you for allowing me to speak today," Julia began, her voice steady and confident. "I'm here because I have a moral obligation to warn you about a dangerous individual who's been operating within your organization." She clicked a remote, and a PowerPoint presentation appeared on the wall-mounted screens. The title slide read, "The Truth About David Carver, a Pattern of Harassment, Manipulation, and Criminal Behavior." My colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Several clients looked confused, clearly wondering why they were being subjected to what appeared to be a domestic dispute. Over the past month, David Carver has waged a systematic campaign of harassment against me, my family, and my professional associates. Julia continued. He's violated privacy laws, engaged in stalking behavior, and used his technical expertise to hack into private communications and business systems. The slides that followed were masterfully crafted, presenting a timeline of events that painted me as an obsessive, vindictive ex-husband who'd used illegal methods to destroy his wife's life. Julia had taken every action I'd documented and reframed it as evidence of my criminal behavior. The video I'd recorded of her affair became illegally obtained surveillance footage. My distribution of that video became revenge harassment. My investigation of Mark's business practices became corporate espionage and hacking. She was good, really good. The presentation was professional, compelling, and emotionally manipulative. Several people in the audience were nodding along, clearly buying her version of events. But Julia had made one critical error. She'd assumed I would sit quietly and let her control the narrative. I stood up from my seat in the back of the room. "Julia, that's a fascinating story, really creative. But I think our audience deserves to hear the complete version." She faltered for a moment, clearly not expecting me to interrupt her performance. "David, you'll have a chance to respond after I finish presenting the evidence. Actually, I think we should present the evidence together, for context." I walked to the front of the room, pulling out my phone and connecting it to the presentation system. Julia tried to block my access to the podium, but I was bigger and more determined. "Ladies and gentlemen, Julia's presentation is certainly compelling, but it's missing some key details that might change your perspective on these events." I clicked play on the first video file. Security camera footage showing Julia and Mark entering our apartment building together. Timestamps clearly visible. This is Julia exercising her right to privacy by bringing her lover to our marital home while I was at work. The room erupted in murmurs and whispers. Julia's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. This footage was obtained illegally, without my consent. Actually, it was obtained from our building's security system, which I helped install and had every right to access as a resident. I played the next file. Audio from Julia's attempt to seduce me back into compliance at Sid's apartment. This is Julia demonstrating her moral obligation to tell the truth by trying to manipulate me into covering up her affair. Julia lunged for my phone, trying to stop the playback, but I was ready for her. The entire conference hall watched as she grabbed at my arms, confirming everything I'd said about her desperation and lack of professional composure. "Stop this!" she screamed. "You're humiliating me in front of everyone." "I'm presenting evidence, Julia. The same evidence you've been trying to suppress through witness tampering and fraud." I played the final recording, Sid's conversation with Julia, where she explicitly asked him to fabricate witness statements and lie to investigators. And this is Julia exercising her whistleblower protection by attempting to recruit accomplices for criminal conspiracy. The room fell completely silent. Julia stood frozen at the podium, finally understanding that her final gambit had backfired catastrophically. She'd tried to destroy me in the most public forum possible, and instead had provided definitive proof of her own criminal behavior. Peterson stood up from his seat in the front row. "Julia, I think you should leave now. Security will escort you out." "This isn't over," she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. "Yes, it is," I replied. "It's completely over." Security guards appeared at her elbows, gently but firmly guiding her toward the exit. She tried to maintain her dignity, walking with her head held high, but everyone in the room could see she was defeated. As the conference hall doors closed behind her, the room erupted in applause. My colleagues, clients, and business partners were applauding not just my victory, but the exposure of Julia's lies and manipulation. Peterson returned to the podium, his face showing relief and admiration. "Well, that was unexpected. Dave, I think we owe you an apology, and probably a promotion." The laughter that followed was warm and genuine, the sound of people who'd witnessed justice being served in real time. Mark appeared in the parking lot as I was leaving the building, clearly having been waiting for the meeting to end. His face was haggard, his expensive suit wrinkled, his confidence completely shattered. "Dave, please. Julia's lost everything. I've lost everything. Isn't that enough?" "It's exactly enough, Mark. It's perfect. What happens now?" "Now you both get to live with the consequences of your choices. Julia's facing criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy. You're facing bankruptcy and divorce. Your reputations are destroyed, your careers are over, and everyone knows exactly what kind of people you really are." Mark looked like he might cry. "We made mistakes, but we don't deserve this. You made choices, Mark. Deliberate, calculated choices to betray someone who trusted you. The consequences aren't punishment. They're just reality catching up with your decisions." He walked away without another word, shoulders slumped in defeat. I stood in the parking lot watching storm clouds gather overhead, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The campaign was over. Justice had been served. Julia and Mark had been held accountable for their actions in the most comprehensive way possible. They'd lost their careers, their reputations, their relationships, and their futures. They'd face criminal charges, financial ruin, and social isolation. They'd spend years trying to rebuild their lives from the wreckage of their own making. It was exactly what they deserved. Thunder rumbled overhead as the first raindrops began to fall. I walked to my car, pulled out my phone, and deleted every file related to Julia and Mark. The videos, the recordings, the photographs, the documents, all of it went into digital oblivion. I didn't need the evidence anymore. The story was over, and it had ended exactly as it should, with truth triumphant and justice served. As I drove away from the office, rain washing the city clean, I allowed myself a final thought about my former wife and her lover. They'd gambled everything on their ability to lie, manipulate, and escape consequences. They'd bet their futures on the assumption that actions didn't have permanent repercussions. They'd lost that bet in the most spectacular way possible. And I'd won something much more valuable than revenge. I'd won my self-respect, my integrity, and my freedom from people who'd never deserved my trust in the first place. The storm was passing, and the sky was beginning to clear.